Nestled deep within a forgotten forest, the old villa loomed like a dark specter among the trees. Its once grand facade was choked with ivy, and its windows were like hollow eyes, staring blankly into the shadows. The locals spoke of it in hushed tones, warning travelers to steer clear, but for Clara the allure was irresistible. An artist seeking inspiration, she rented the place for a month, eager to escape the noise of the city. On her first night, Clara unpacked her canvases, feeling an inexplicable chill creep through the air. As she prepared to paint, she noticed the whispers. They were faint, just at the edge of her hearing, like the rustle of leaves. She shrugged it off, attributing it to the wind filtering through the broken windows. Days passed, and Clara fell into a routine. She would rise with the dawn, painting the forest bathed in golden light. But each night the whispers grew louder, wrapping around her like tendrils of fog. They seemed to beckon her, urging her to uncover something hidden within the villa's decaying walls. One evening, Clara stumbled upon a locked door in the far corner of the ground floor. It was small and unassuming, but something about it drew her in. She found a rusty key hanging on a nearby hook, almost as if it had been waiting for her. Heart racing, she inserted the key, and the door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase spiraling down into darkness. Compelled by a mix of dread and curiosity, Clara descended the stairs, the air growing colder with each step. The whispers intensified, a cacophony of pleading voices swirling around her. She reached the bottom, finding herself in a dimly lit cellar filled with dust-covered crates and tattered furniture. In the center of the room stood an old mirror, its surface clouded and cracked. As she approached, the whispers morphed into distinct phrases, words of sorrow and longing. Help us. Find peace. They echoed in her mind, sending shivers down her spine. Suddenly, the mirror's surface rippled, revealing images of the villa's past. A family gathered around a fireplace, laughter ringing out, but the scene twisted, darkening as shadows enveloped them. The voices grew frantic. "We're trapped! Free us!" Clara stumbled back, her heart pounding. She turned to flee, but the cellar door slammed shut behind her. Panic surged through her as she banged on the door, the whispers now a frantic chorus, urging her to listen. "What do you want?" she shouted, her voice cracking. "Find the truth," they echoed. "You must remember." Desperation clawed at her, and she returned to the mirror, trying to steady her breath. As she peered into the glass, images began to focus. A woman, pale and hollow-eyed, standing in the same villa, her face a mask of despair. Clara felt a strange connection to the woman, as if their souls were intertwined. The woman raised her hand, and Clara instinctively reached out, fingers brushing against the mirror's surface. In that instant, the air crackled with energy, and the room around her exploded into chaos. Shadows danced wildly, the voices melding into a single wail of anguish. Clara's vision blurred, and she was transported into a memory, a vision of a stormy night long ago. The family, now revealed as her ancestors, huddled in fear as the walls of the villa shook. A figure loomed in the doorway, a dark silhouette with malevolent eyes, and with a flick of its wrist, the family was silenced, their souls bound to the villa forever. With a jolt, Clara was thrown back into the cellar. The mirror shattered, and the whispers fell silent. Gasping, she found herself alone, the door swinging open as if released from a spell. She stumbled out, the weight of the tragedy crashing down upon her. As she fled the villa, she glanced back one last time. In the shattered mirror fragments, she could see the faces of her ancestors, their eyes filled with gratitude and sorrow. She had uncovered their truth, but the price had been steep. Days turned into weeks after her escape. Clara returned to the city, yet the whispers lingered in her mind like a haunting melody. At night, they wrapped around her, bringing fragments of dreams filled with shadowy figures and distant cries. Her once bright canvases became dark and twisted, reflecting the turmoil inside her. Determined to break free from the villa's grip, Clara sought the help of a local historian, a woman named Agnes, who specialized in the region's folklore. In Agnes's cluttered study, surrounded by stacks of ancient books and dusty artifacts, Clara shared her experience. "That villa," Agnes said, her voice low, is said to be cursed. The family that lived there disappeared, their spirits trapped until their story is told. She paused, eyeing Clara closely. You felt their pain, didn't you? Clara nodded, her throat dry. But how do I help them? How do I free their souls? Agnes handed Clara a tattered book. You must delve into the family's history, uncover their secrets. Only then can you give them peace. Clara immersed herself in the research, combing through faded documents and yellowed photographs. She discovered that the family had lived in the villa for generations, a lineage marked by tragedy. A betrayal had torn them apart, leading to the dark figure's arrival on that stormy night, an ancestor who had turned against his own kin, driven by greed and jealousy. With each revelation, Clara felt a growing connection to the family. She learned of their dreams, their hopes, and ultimately their demise. The whispers in her mind began to change, now urging her to share their story, to paint the truth of their existence. After weeks of research, Clara returned to the villa. Armed with her paints and a resolve to honor her ancestors, she set up in the main room where the family had once gathered. The air felt heavy, yet she was no longer afraid. She could sense their presence, guiding her brush as she began to paint. The first stroke revealed the family vibrant and alive. Laughter filled the air as she captured moments of joy, celebrations, holidays, and ordinary days of love. The shadows that had once haunted her canvas began to dissipate as she painted their smiles, their togetherness. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the whispers transformed into a soothing hum. Clara felt a warm energy surround her, like the embrace of long-lost relatives. The shadows that had lingered in the corners of the room started to retreat, replaced by a soft glow. With the final stroke, Clara stepped back and stared at her creation. The painting pulsed with life, capturing the essence of the family. Love intertwined with sorrow, hope amid despair. In that moment, she understood. This was their story, one they had been desperate to tell. As Clara began to pack her things, she felt a gentle breeze sweep through the room, carrying with it a chorus of grateful voices. "Thank you," they whispered, the words swirling around her like a comforting embrace. "You have freed us." As she exited the villa, she glanced back one last time. The once dark structure now shimmered with a warm light, as if the souls trapped within had finally found peace. The forest surrounding it seemed to breathe easier, and the whispers that had haunted her transformed into a soft lullaby. Clara returned to her life in the city, forever changed. The experience lingered, but now it filled her with purpose. Each painting she created became a tribute to her ancestors and the stories that needed to be told, a reminder that even in darkness, there can be light. And every night as she drifted into sleep, she would hear their voices, not in desperation, but in harmony, a beautiful reminder that the past would always echo in the present, waiting to be heard. You'll never believe what happened to me and my friends when we went camping on Blackthorn Mountain. It was supposed to be a fun weekend, a chance to escape the noise of the city and reconnect with nature. 5 of us went: Mike, Sarah, Jess, Tom, and me, Liam. We set up our camp in a secluded clearing surrounded by towering pines, the air crisp with the scent of pine needles and smoke from our campfire. That first night, we sat around the fire, roasting marshmallows and sharing stories. Jess, always the one to stir the pot, brought up the old cabin at the summit. "They say it's haunted by the ghost of a hermit who disappeared years ago," she said, a mischievous glint in her eye. Mike laughed it off. "Just a local legend to scare people away. What do you really think happened?" "Well," Jess continued, "some say he went mad. Others say he was hiding something dark. Either way, people who went up there didn't come back." Tom, ever the thrill seeker, piped up, "Let's go check it out tomorrow. It'll be an adventure." At first I felt uneasy about it, but excitement buzzed in the air. What harm could it do? We all agreed, half-jokingly promising to stick together. The next morning we started our hike. As we ascended, the atmosphere changed. The woods grew quieter, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. It felt strange. Birds that had sung so sweetly the day before were eerily silent, and even the rustling leaves seemed muted. When we finally reached the cabin, it was every bit as creepy as I'd imagined. The structure was decrepit, with broken windows that looked like hollow eyes. Inside, dust swirled in the sunlight and remnants of an old life were scattered about. It felt like stepping into a forgotten world. I could see Jess's eyes widen as she pointed to a faded photograph pinned to the wall. It was a man with wild eyes and a twisted smile standing in front of the cabin. "Guys, look at this," she said, her voice a mixture of excitement and dread. That's when Mike and Tom discovered a locked trunk beneath the floorboards. Curiosity got the best of them, and after a few kicks, they broke it open. Inside, they found old coins, a rusted dagger, and journals filled with frantic writing, ramblings of a man who had lost his mind, speaking of voices and shadows that danced just out of sight. One entry struck Mike deeply. "They come at night. I can hear them whispering. I'm not alone." I watched as he closed the trunk, a shiver running through him. "We need to go. Now." But Tom was insistent. "Come on, let's explore a bit more." As the sun dipped lower, the atmosphere grew heavier. We decided to leave, but the moment we stepped outside, something shifted. A thick silence hung in the air, and the whispers started, a soft, urgent voice beckoning us from the depths of the woods. "Did you hear that?" Sarah whispered, her eyes darting around. Just as we began to back away, a figure emerged from the trees, an indistinct silhouette that seemed to glide rather than walk. The firelight flickered, and shadows danced wildly around us. "Let's get out of here," I shouted, my heart racing. The others agreed, and we took off down the trail, not looking back. When we reached our campsite, the sun had completely vanished, and the darkness felt alive. The fire crackled as we huddled close, but the feeling of dread lingered. The whispers continued, swirling around us like a sinister fog. "Come back. Join us." What happened next was a blur. The fire suddenly flickered, casting erratic shadows that seemed to leap and twist. A hand reached out from the darkness, grabbing my wrist, pulling me back. "Liam!" It was Tom, his face pale and terrified. "We need to regroup." We found Sarah and Jess hiding behind a tree, their faces etched with fear. "Where's Mike?" Sarah asked, panic creeping into her voice. "He was right behind me," I yelled, but the only sound was the rustling of leaves and the distant whispers growing louder. "We have to go find him." "Are you insane?" Jess exclaimed. "That thing is out there." But as we stood there, I could see Mike's figure at the cabin door staring back at us. "Mike!" I called, but he didn't respond. Instead, he pointed toward the woods, eyes wide with terror. That's when we saw them. Shadows emerging from the trees, figures shifting in the dim light. The whispers turned into desperate cries. "Join us! Join us!" "Run!" Tom shouted, and we bolted toward the cabin, hearts pounding. The door slammed shut behind us, sealing Mike inside. "Help me!" His voice echoed, but it was drowned out by the wailing shadows that filled the cabin. Panic surged through us as we pressed our backs against the trees, feeling the shadows closing in. The whispers became a chaotic cacophony, and I knew we had to do something. Anything. "Burn the journals!" I shouted, recalling the frantic writings Mike had found. "Maybe it will break the curse." With that, we raced back to the trunk. I could feel the shadows creeping closer, but we managed to gather the journals. I struck a match, watching as the first page ignited, the flames licking hungrily at the paper. The fire grew, illuminating the cabin's interior. The shadows writhed, shrieking in fury. "No, don't!" I could hardly breathe as the shadows lunged at us, their forms distorting into grotesque shapes. The journals caught fire one by one, and the whispers turned into wails of agony. The shadows recoiled, swirling in chaos, and for a moment, It felt like we might escape. But then, just as suddenly as it had started, everything went silent. The fire burned bright, and I could see Mike's terrified face peering through the window, but the shadows were gone. We stumbled back, hearts racing, breathless with disbelief. The cabin stood ominously silent, the remnants of the journals crackling in the fire. "Where did they go?" Jess whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know," I said, shaking my head. "But we need to get out of here, now." As we raced back down the mountain, the whispers faded, but the feeling of being watched lingered. The memories of that night haunted us, etched into our minds. We swore never to return to Blackthorn Mountain, but sometimes, late at night, I can still hear the echoes of those whispers beckoning me back. Gather round and let me tell you about a night I'll never forget, one that still haunts my dreams. It all began when I took a job as a night guard at the mysterious museum, a place shrouded in legend and whispers, deep in the heart of the city. The museum was an old building, its exterior a patchwork of dark stone and wrought iron, crumbling in places yet full of an unsettling beauty. It housed artifacts from lost civilizations, oddities collected from distant lands, and pieces of art that seemed to breathe with life. I was drawn to the place, excited at the prospect of protecting treasures that held secrets older than time itself. The first few weeks were mostly uneventful. I'd walk the dimly lit halls checking on the exhibits, accompanied only by the echoes of my footsteps and the occasional creak of the building settling. But on one particular night, something changed. It started at midnight, as I stood in the main hall, gazing at a towering statue of a god from an ancient culture. I felt a strange sensation, as if the air had thickened around me, pressing against my chest. It was then that I noticed it, a shadow flitting between the displays. My heart raced as I strained to see, but it vanished into the darkness, leaving me with only a whisper of movement. Probably just a trick of the light, I told myself, trying to shake off the unease. I resumed my patrol, but the feeling lingered, like a weight on my shoulders. As the night wore on, I found myself drawn to the Egyptian exhibit, a section of the museum known for its collection of mummies and sarcophagi. The dim light cast eerie shadows that danced across the walls, and as I approached, I was struck by the sensation of being watched. I paused in front of a particularly ornate sarcophagus, its hieroglyphs swirling with dark, mysterious energy. Suddenly I heard a low whisper, as if someone were speaking directly into my ear. I turned, heart pounding, but the hall was empty. Just the rustle of ancient linen and the scent of dust filled the air. "Get a grip," I muttered, brushing off the chill creeping up my spine. But as I continued my patrol, the whispers returned, growing louder, weaving into a chorus of voices that seemed to echo through the halls. "Join us. Watch. Listen." I gripped my flashlight tightly, directing the beam into the darkness, searching for the source of the sounds. My pulse quickened as I approached the medieval wing, where the walls were lined with suits of armor, their visors down, staring blankly into space. A faint rustling came from the far end of the hall, and I edged closer, heart in my throat. As I stepped into the room, I was met by a tapestry depicting a gruesome battle. The knights were locked in a fierce struggle, and in the corner of the scene, a figure cloaked in shadow seemed to gaze directly at me. I felt an unsettling familiarity, as if I knew it from somewhere deep within my own memories. Just then, I heard footsteps behind me, heavy, deliberate. I spun around, but there was no one there. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling slightly. Silence answered me, thick and suffocating. I took a step back, and as I did, the tapestry fluttered violently, revealing a hidden section. My curiosity piqued. I stepped closer, heart racing. The fabric was frayed, and as I pulled it aside, I found a narrow door, barely visible in the gloom. With a mix of trepidation and excitement, I pushed it open. The door creaked, revealing a dark staircase spiraling down into the bowels of the museum. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. "Come, join us." Against my better judgment, I descended into the darkness, each step echoing ominously in the confined space. The air grew cooler, and I could feel the weight of history pressing down on me. At the bottom, I found myself in a small chamber lined with shelves filled with dusty artifacts and what looked like forgotten relics of ancient rituals. In the center of the room stood an altar, covered in strange symbols. The air around it hummed with energy, and I could feel a pull toward it. As I stepped closer, I was overwhelmed by visions, flashes of people dressed in ancient garb, their faces twisted in anguish, pleading silently for release. I stumbled back, panic gripping me. Suddenly, the shadows deepened, coalescing into a figure that stood before me, a wraith-like presence with hollow eyes that seemed to see into my very soul. "You are chosen," it whispered, its voice a chilling echo that reverberated through the chamber. I turned to flee, but the shadows coiled around me, freezing me in place. "You must join us," the figure urged, reaching out a skeletal hand. "You are not the first to find this place, nor will you be the last." In a burst of adrenaline, I broke free and sprinted back up the staircase, the whispers turning to screams behind me. I emerged into the main hall, gasping for breath. The museum felt alive, the artifacts watching, waiting. I darted through the exhibits, desperate to reach the exit, but the layout seemed to shift, leading me back into the depths. The shadows followed, wrapping around me, closing in. I could feel their cold breath on my neck, and the whispers morphed into a cacophony of voices drowning out my thoughts. "Join us. Become one of us." I stumbled into a room filled with mirrors, the reflections twisting and warping as I moved. Each surface showed not just my terrified face, but also the wraith behind me, lurking closer with each passing moment. I screamed and stumbled back, and the mirrors shattered, the glass raining down around me. In that moment of chaos, I caught sight of a flickering light through the shattered reflections. A way out. I dashed toward it, the shadows clawing at my heels, but I burst through the door, tumbling into the cool night air. I made it outside, breathless and shaken. The museum loomed behind me, its windows dark as if the horrors within had retreated. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched, that the shadows were waiting, biding their time. For weeks afterward, I couldn't sleep. Every night, the whispers invaded my dreams, calling me back to the museum, beckoning me to return. I quit my job, but the memories lingered. And on restless nights, when the wind howls just right, I still hear the echoes of that night. The whispers never truly left me, and sometimes when I pass by the museum, I could swear I see the shadows moving, waiting for someone new to draw into their depths. So, if you ever find yourself near the mysterious museum, heed my warning. Don't linger too long, don't let the shadows pull you in, because once you hear their call, you might never escape.